Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to 7 things Americans are more likely to own than British people. I am interested by this because I don't really know where, how this is gonna sort of vary and be different in each country. Maybe like cars or homes, that's one. Houses, homes, like owning your own house. I feel like that's probably a lot more attainable in the US for sure. But other than that, I'm not too sure. So yeah, we're going to just check this out. Hopefully going to enjoy. And let's check this video out.
You are in the shot. I don't think that they're going to be happy about that. We're on. Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest
Such an
to
elegant
uncover
cat.
all of the memos that Britain
Or
and
just a cat.
America lost in the pond. And one of those memos pertains to the things we own, whether that's money, a house, your soul. We all have things in our possession that make us who we are. But after living in the United States for 16 years, I've come to find that Americans are more likely to own certain things than British people are. Same is true in reverse, but that's not what this video is about. Now, if you own a free subscription to this YouTube channel, thanks. If not, do that now. Sorry for scaring the cat. In the meantime, here are 7 things that Americans are more likely to own than British people.
A car.
And the first thing that we're going to talk about is
we go.
cars. And you might
I
be
nailed
thinking,
it.
Lawrence, that's not surprising. You always talk about how America has a really large car culture. And this is true, but I think that ignores the fact that when I lived in Britain, I was far more likely to experience a traffic jam. Why is that, Lawrence? Well, because we have way more people in a smaller area. And so even though there are fewer cars per person, there are still millions of cars. So that probably cemented in my head a false impression of just how many cars we have in England compared to here. But there's no arguing with facts, even though some of you try. In the US, about 91% of households own at least one car.
91%.
While in the UK, it's closer to 77%. Of course, Americans don't just stop at one car. They're often juggling 2, 3, maybe 4 vehicles per family, practically enough to start a car dealership. This partly explains why in the state of Montana, each resident averages nearly 2 cars. In Britain,
2 cars is the average, wow.
if somebody owns 2 cars,
They're balling.
they're either a millionaire or a car thief. In fact, the idea of parking more than one car outside of your average British home sounds like a logistical nightmare. So while Brits are debating whether to pay for an MOT this year, Americans are hopping into their pickup trucks, SUVs, and maybe even a spare sedan.
A dog. I'd say this is a lot more similar in terms of households that have dogs.
Perhaps one of the more surprising entries on this list is that Americans are more likely than British people to own a dog. Firstly, I can say that anecdotally as somebody who lived in Britain for a long time and didn't own my own dog, but did after I moved to the United States. Therefore, that's proof. Just not very good proof.
No.
Before we look at the facts again, I have more anecdotes. Because initially, after I moved to the US, I lived with my in-laws who had 240 dogs. It was 3 dogs, but I mean, still 3 dogs feels like a lot, especially as somebody who raised a puppy last year. And yet it feels like it's not particularly uncommon in America. In Britain, as my wife said to me the other day, we seem to have a concern about leaving dogs alone when we go to work, which is fair enough, but I'm, you know, a YouTube sensation and I work from home, so I don't have that problem.
Lawrence, we really need to work on your relatability.
That said, it is one thing to feel that Americans have more
Dog is beautiful, man. Look at his eyes.
dogs than
Or her, I don't know.
British people.
I can't remember if his dog's a boy or a girl.
Once again, here's voiceover Lawrence from the basement to give you the facts. Statistically, around 40% of American households have at least one dog, which means that the other 60% have made a mistake. Compare this to the UK, where the percentage is thought to be between 30 and 36%.
Oh, so it's very close.
So why is there a disparity? Well, maybe it's because dogs require something that we as a nation of British people haven't quite figured
Space.
out. Enthusiasm. Either way, Americans don't just live with dogs, they treat them like royalty. Doggy
Jesus.
daycare, pop cups, Halloween costumes. And I was about to say that it all sounds a little bit much, but then I remembered Arthur has enjoyed
Arthur. So Arthur's a boy. There we go.
all 3 of those things. Dogs bring us joy, but there's one animal out there that insists on doing the opposite. Data brokers. Data brokers are those entities.
That's a good transition, although, is that an animal? Here's his little discount code if you're interested. Oh.
Get your discount and to thereafter protect your data. The link is in my description below. You're not
Yeah.
going to believe this one. When I was doing research for this video, my face turned into thumbnail Lawrence because, and I hope you're sitting down for this, Americans are more likely to own a gun than British people.
No.
Which might sound like sarcasm, but one thing that often doesn't get spoken about when it comes to Britain is we do have guns. It's true. Contrary to popular belief, not all guns are completely banned across the UK. They're just heavily regulated.
I think it's like farmers and stuff, right? I've never seen like someone with a gun. I mean, I don't think you just sort of see people in the US just strolling around with guns either. But I assume maybe they're in your house, you've seen them in your house or whatever. I've never seen like a gun like out and about. Which is, I mean, I've seen like airsoft guns, so they look like guns, but they're not because obviously they're airsoft. Or paintball guns, you know. Or toy guns. That's the most I've seen.
In order to obtain a rifle or a shotgun, a civilian must obtain applicable licenses and must have a valid reason for owning one. These reasons include sport shooting and hunting, but don't extend to firing off a few rounds at midnight on New Year's Eve. And yes, that last sentence was aimed at Chainsaw Jim. However, as is famously known, this pales in comparison to gun ownership in the United States. In the US, it turns out there are more guns than people. For every 100 Americans, there are about 120 firearms, making it the highest such ratio in the world. For sake of comparison, 100 Brits will statistically have about 5, which is similar.
That's a lot more than I thought. In every 100 people, there's 5 that will own a gun. I did not know it was that high.
To the percentage of Brits that have been thrown out of a pub. Coincidence? I don't know. So Brits often ask me, "Ooh, Lawrence, how many guns do you see every single day?" And the answer to that is next to 0. Because unless you happen to be friends with hunters, members of the police force, or gangs, people aren't just wielding them on the street. They conceal them in their clothes. I don't have X-ray eyes, so I just assume that maybe they're there. There's a surprising lack of visibility around guns. And you might say, Lawrence, that's because you live in Illinois where they have strict open carry laws. But the thing is, I also lived in Indiana where they don't, and it was the same story. I'm really just pointing this out so that my Aunt Mildred stops asking me if I'm all right. Walking down the street, I think I've maybe seen one gun in 16 years wielded on the street, and it was a super soaker.
What the fuck?
Yes,
a
lot
Bible
of American
this is true.
households, I would imagine, do.
I mean, isn't the UK like 5% Christianity or something? In terms of people that still like pray every day and stuff.
Own a Bible, and that's because I think Americans in general, if they are religious, are more likely to wear their religion on their sleeve than we are in Britain, where people, generally speaking, keep that to themselves. I think as well, it's fair to say that Britain is a more secular culture. We've got a higher percentage of people there that I would say are non-believers or non-practicing religious people. Whereas here, while America doesn't have churches that are 800 years old, it does have churches on about every corner trying to compete with Starbucks. And so Bibles, as well as crucifixes on walls, and maybe a Bible verse or two hanging on the same wall, is just something you see way more of here. Even people I've known who aren't like particularly overtly religious have that stuff on their walls because it's just sort of culturally ingrained. Here's a statistic for you. In the US, nearly 88% of households own at least one Bible. And not just that, the average household owns 4, about one for each car. Now, I couldn't find any reliable statistics for Britain, but I did find this. Only 6% of Brits actively practice Christianity or regularly read the Bible. So whether it's a sign of devotion or, a cultural habit, the Bible is clearly a key player in American households. And as for Britain, let's just say the Bible's collecting dust next to that unopened copy of Pride and Prejudice.
A gym membership. Americans are more likely to own a gym membership.
Gym memberships, and some of you might be watching this going, isn't America famously kind of overweight and out of shape? And while there are very much elements of that, it's all...
I'd assume it's probably a very similar number, but I don't really know, because it's hard to judge, because people that you know at the gym and then people that live their day-to-day life, it's hard to actually know if they go to the gym or not. I'm going to guess in the UK about 20% of people own a gym membership. Is that high? That might be a bit high. That is going to be high, because then you think about kids who can't go to the gym, or people that may have certain issues that just stop them from being able to go. Now I'm going to guess 10% of people own a gym membership in the UK. That still seems very high. That'd be a lot of money for gyms. 10% of the population. Well, that's like 6 million people. And I assume it's going to be around that.
It's also a country of extremes. We talked about this recently, to the extent that gym culture, just like car culture, just like any other embedded culture within American culture, is a real thing. You could be driving through Chicago just down the street and you look to your right and see people working out through a window. And these are not uncommon. But for me, growing up in Britain, I think the last time I went to a gym was at school. Actually,
It definitely has changed. Like on my course, all the guys that I'm friends with, we all like go to the gym and stuff. And I'd say is that gym culture? I don't know really how you could determine it is culture, but all of us go. So that's 100% of people in our class going to the gym who are guys.
I think that's still the case. I don't know why that is. I think we're a nation of joggers, so we like to work out that way, and cycling. I think our country has the infrastructure for outdoor exercise more perhaps than the United States does. Where also, I think you're less likely to find a sort of public swimming bath. Like, they do exist here, but in Britain they're far more common, although the one that I grew up with in my hometown closed down, so I don't know how true that still is. I think it's just we have different ways of staying in shape. Statistically, around 24% of Americans claim to have a gym membership, which sounds impressive until you realise that most of us think that leg day is walking to and from the basement, and cardio means bending down to tie your shoelace. Meanwhile, the British approach fitness with a little more subtlety. About 14% of Brits are signed up for a gym, but it's not because they're less active. After all, lugging around 4 shopping bags of Tesco meal deals has its own charm. Why sweat in lycra when you've got the great outdoors and a pot noodle as your workout incentive? And yes,
Sweatpants.
something that you might wear at a gymnasium, sweatpants. I remember having a pair of sweatpants when I was a child. I don't remember owning a single pair since then. In Britain, it could be that we're less likely to embrace casual fashion.
Does he mean like tracksuit bottoms? People are in tracksuit bottoms here. I mean, when I wanted to be comfortable, I'll just wear them. I mean, it just depends. If I'm being a bit more like, I'm just trying to dress a bit nicer, I won't wear them. But going to the gym and lounging in the house and going to the shop and like quickly just getting something and then coming back, I'll wear trackies.
I do remember shell suits. Here,
or joggers, I think they're called in the US.
Aren't just the fashion choice of the gymnasium goers. I sometimes see people walking down this street in them, or going to the shops, or sitting in a restaurant. And frankly, they just look a little bit silly. Although I've just remembered I was wearing a raccoon suit earlier. So what do we think, voiceover Lawrence? Are your observations of sweatpants accurate? Americans are nearly twice as likely to own a pair of sweatpants compared to their British counterparts.
Really?
Twice. And that's not just some stat I've made up. That's a stat that ChatGPT just made up, but it sounds right. Meanwhile, across the pond, Britons seem to reserve their sweatpants for painting the house. It's less Netflix and chill.
This makes no sense though, because the UK is cold. Like, it's a very cold place. A lot of places in the US are warm all year round. So why do you even own sweatpants in some of these places? I feel like that's probably a bit wrong. I feel like maybe more Americans own sweatpants, but overall, it's probably a lot closer than like double the amount of sweatpants that people wearing them in the UK.
Or DIY and drill. But maybe it comes down to the weather. I mean, Americans enjoy a cozy sweatpant year round thanks to air-conditioned bliss, whereas Brits don't do that. So is this a love story between Americans and their joggers, or just a cultural misunderstanding about what's truly formal wear for a Target run? Either way, the numbers don't lie, even made up ones. Sweatpants are basically America's second uniform.
2 toilets, what, in a house?
Not to finish talking about toilets, but we're going to finish talking about toilets. Because in the vast majority of the more than 10 American addresses that I've lived at, there has been a second toilet. Am I complaining? No, because then you get one to yourself when you live with a...
That would be a perk for sure.
Only one other person. Mine's the basement one. But in Britain, a second toilet within a house, I think, would be considered a luxury. And maybe that's down to the fact that our houses are smaller, or that we don't have White Castle. But I think every address that I lived at in Britain had just the one, which It's really bad when it gets blocked and you live with 5 people. According to a recent survey, 65% of US homes have 2 bathrooms compared to just 27% in the UK. Now, that's not just convenience, it's a logistical dream. Imagine never having to queue up at 7 a.m, dodging flatmates in fluffy robes while clutching a toothbrush like a weapon of war. So why is there a disparity? Well, it boils down to that thing again: space. The average American home is over twice the size of the average British one, meaning there's plenty of room to fit that extra throne. Although in Britain, we do have actual thrones. Anyway, that was it. I'm sure there are plenty more things that Americans are more likely to own. If, for some unfathomable reason, you like these videos, then why not help me fund them by becoming a patron of this channel? You can do that at patreon.com.
Oh, there we go. Definitely no complaints about a kitty in this shot. I refuse to spend money to go to the gym when back in school I put so much effort into faking notes to avoid it. That's a fair point. We're always happy about cats. Your editor knows that. With like gym in school, like we call it PE. It was my favourite lesson, and some people just hated it. But it was always my favourite thing to do. I just loved having PE. But so many people hated it, and I just find that so wild. But it's just, I guess everyone's got their own things that they enjoy, right? Now, please do one telling us what Brits buy that Americans don't. That would be fascinating. What do the comments say here? I'm betting on electric kettle making the list. Eel jelly? Brother, electric kettle, duvets, hot water bottle. Hot water bottles, yeah, I've got one of those duvets. I mean, aren't they just blankets? Doesn't everyone have duvets? I don't know. Yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this reaction. And yeah, until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.